What would this channel be if I didn't have a roofing video pop up at least once every couple of months? Incomplete. Yeah, incomplete. That's what it would be. Buckle up your seat as I give you a day in the life of facilities maintenance. If you've been following along on any of the shorts that I've posted over the last few weeks, you will know that I've been fighting with this roof again. After dealing with so many issues with this roof in this one area over the course of the last couple of years, I reached a point where I had so many other jobs on the go that I just needed to hand this off. I just said, let's call in some roofers.
So frustrated.
And the roofers came in and dealt with it. No, actually they didn't. And that's why I'm still standing up on the roof here. We had another leak show up in the same general areas where other leaks had been. Actually, I should back up. The first set of roofers came, they looked and looked and looked and they couldn't find anything. And they said, yeah, sorry, we can't find anything. And so the roofing company sent out a different set of guys. And these are the guys that said, yes, we're the ones that they send when the more junior guys can't find the problem. And so they came, spent a few hours up on the roof and proceeded to make multiple test cuts. And they said, oh yeah, we found the problem. We put a patch on it and you'll be good to go now. I don't know what they found. Apparently it was just a couple of small pinholes. There was no way that those little pinholes would account for the amount of water that was coming through the roof. Fast forward a week or two and the next time it rains, we have the same heavy leaking going on.
Say about the same, Arne. Coming in pretty steady.
And a third crew comes out and they do their inspection. They are unsure. They made a test cut that I referred to earlier. Let me show it to you. So this is the test cut here. When they cut the membrane away here, they saw that the insulation on top was dry. But they were able to determine that it's coming from that direction somewhere, under the insulation. So I was up here with them when the older fellow told the younger guy with the shovel to start clearing a pathway in that direction so that they could inspect the roof and try and determine where this leak was coming from. And then they left. Fast forward a couple weeks and the same two fellows return to say that they need to make a permanent patch over top of their test cut, which I just showed you back there. The problem is that after making the permanent repair, they still hadn't resolved the issue. We asked them about it and they said, yeah, it's not the roof. We've looked everywhere and we've determined that it's not the roofing membrane, that it must be coming through one of your heaters back here. And they actually believed that it was this one right here because this one lines up with their test cut that they made over there. Two things. I was skeptical because there was an awful lot of water coming through that spot in the roof below. And I couldn't see that much water coming through a heating unit. The other thing is that I'm stubborn. I set out to prove them wrong, might be a little strong. I set out to prove or disprove their theory as a way of trying to move forward. So in an effort to either prove or disprove their theory, I purchased a cheap canopy. And I started by putting it over top of RTU number 7 right there. And when the rains came, the leak persisted. So I knew it wasn't that one. So I went from there and I moved it to there and I moved it to that one, which is in line on the other side. And then I moved it back to this one. And then I moved it back to that one and that one and that one. And after that, I was very confident that I'd disproven their theory. So now what do? Do I try and find a different roofing company to come out and charge us a whole bunch of money to tell us the same thing that the first company did? Or do I start digging? Well, I elected to start digging. But before I started digging, I wanted to try and determine how far back from that test cut the water was actually originating from. And so the only way that I could do that is from underneath. So I went underneath and landmarked exactly where the water was dripping through the seams and followed those tracks as far as I could go. When I got back to the RTU itself from underneath, I started working my way back from the RTU, following the tracks that I knew water was in, and I came across another seam about 30 feet away from the seam that was leaking, and there was no water there. I followed that back a little further, and there were actually a couple of weld holes through the metal in one of the tracks, and it was completely dry. So I moved back even further to where there was a stain in the ceiling, and I looked up there just to confirm, and sure enough, there's a screw holding a wire clamp in the ceiling, and every once in a while that would drip, which would account for the stain on the ceiling. So I moved back a little ways, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna drill a couple of test holes here, and it was bone dry. Now, if I landmark that up on the roof here, just to give you some reference, you can see the test cut right over there. The stain on the ceiling was right about there, maybe 10 or 12 feet away, and the holes that I drilled were right about here, and I might be 25 feet away. So what that was telling me was another confirmation that perhaps the roofers are not correct. But because the roofers had made their test cut right here, and because they had cleared a gravel path all the way to that RTU right there, I'm working from the assumption that of course they inspected the area very close to their test cut. I mean, that's going to be where you start looking, right? So because they had done that, I assumed, and maybe they did and they just missed it, but because they'd done that, I thought, okay, I need to start examining from further out.
That cost me hours of work that I will never get back.
Here's our test cut here. Where I started clearing is I wanted to follow kind of a grid pattern, and so I started over here in around where these gas lines are. You can see how the gravel's been disturbed. I started on just this side, and I went and I went and I went as far as here. So that's a good 25 feet from there to where I'm standing. And I worked my way across this way, which is, another 30 feet or so, because I went as far as the outside of this RTU here and back and that. So I uncovered a massive area of gravel here to examine the membrane beneath it, and I was finding nothing at all. And I'm getting back to here and reaching a point where, this is absolutely ridiculous. Now, fortunately, I'd probably done about maybe 2/3 of this, and Mark was able to come up here and help me on the last day that I was up here clearing gravel. And between the two of us, we got back to here, this area here that's now cleared. When Mark was over here backfilling gravel, putting it back in place, I continued to look in this area right here. One of the seams had a little ripple in it, and so I reached down and I pressed it with my thumb, and wouldn't you know, air bubbles came out. Well, that's a telltale sign that we might have an issue here. So I was able to stick my pinky underneath there, and I went, oh man, you have got to be kidding me. Is this our leak right here?
Right in the middle of where they did multiple test cuts?
Which I assumed that they would have found, because they cleared this whole area to examine the membrane as far back as that RTU over there. As I'm working my finger in this area, the water just starts pouring through our leak downstairs. And it wasn't raining that day. There was just a little bit of standing water up here still. I realized at that point, this is our problem, right here, 5 feet away. So I put a little test patch over here just to determine if it's the problem or not. And sure enough, we get a heavy rain the next day, and I got a phone call to tell me that, hey, it's raining heavy, and this bucket is completely dry. No water is dripping into it at all. But at this point, I don't care who found it. I'm just glad that it's found. Now I'm going to go ahead and repair it. It's actually quite comical when you look at this. Unlike the One Ring in the Lord of the Rings that wanted to be found, this is the leak that did not want to be found. Like I said, we've had multiple crews up here searching for it, and that is the most recent test cut where they determined that the water was coming from this direction. However, right over there, that is one that a different crew did, and right there, that is one that a different crew did. And the irony is that it turned out to be right there. So the only thing left to do at this point, which is the easy part, is to patch it. But I can't do that today. I have to wait until this water recedes a bit. So I'm going to make a patch that actually covers all of this. I just have to measure the length of that. 2.5 feet will do it. It's 12 inches wide, so it'll overlap all of this, and I can get rid of that altogether. And while I'm up here, I can see another piece of return to bond right here. It's not sealing up a cut like the other one was. This was an old original seam that I just didn't like the look of, and so I slapped a piece of this down over top of it. However, I don't like the look of this surface. This isn't as durable as, say, a Firestone product, which is made of actual rubber. And so just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna patch over top of all of this as well. And then I can sleep better at night knowing I don't have to worry about this stuff ever again. Well, I'm up on the high school gym today. It's the weekend. I got called out for another problem. There's a volleyball tournament going on and water is leaking into the gym right now. So I'm here to check that out. But I thought I'd update you on Old Faithful over here. I'm happy to report that the patch that I put in the other day is holding because it's currently under 3 inches of water